Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, where my guest today is Michael J. Gelb. I will tell you all about Michael in just a moment. Grace Under Pressure is that show that deals with what's too often dismissed as the soft stuff, the caring, the commitment we exert toward others. But when you do it from a leadership perspective, and you will discover that Michael has some keen insights into leadership, you do it to bring people together for common cause. Michael Gelb, welcome to Grace Under Pressure.
Fabulous to be with you.
Great. Well, I want to tell folks all about you. I will say, I have known of you for 25 years, I think, at least, because you had a fantastic new book came out, How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. And that, I remember reading that book, and I think I passed it on to a client. So I got to get another copy. But anyway, you are a leading authority on the application of genius thinking. Who better to start with than Leonardo? And you followed that up with Innovate Like Edison. And we're going to talk about that book too. So your books have been translated into 25 languages, which is pretty impressive. You received a Brain of the Year award from the Brain Foundation. Other honorees include Stephen Hawking and Garry, Kasparov, and Bill Gates. So you're in pretty heady company there. And you do a lot of teaching you're teaching at Fordham and other places. And you're, like me, a member of MG100 Coaches. And on a sidekick, if that weren't enough, you are a juggler, and you once performed with the Rolling Stones. So welcome to Grace Under Pressure, Michael. So
thank you so much.
Great. So your breakthrough book, or at least to me, that's how I met you before meeting you virtually and connecting, was How to Think Like Leonardo. How did that book come about, Michael? So.
Well, Leonardo da Vinci was my childhood hero, along with Superman. When I got a little older, I realized that Superman was only a comic book character, but that Leonardo was real. And he seemed to embody the essence of our human potential, the ultimate Renaissance person. And as I got into being invited around the world to speak about creativity and innovation, I would naturally tell stories about Da Vinci. And then I was in Washington, D.C., speaking to the Young Presidents Organization, one of their premier events, the university there. And I knew that they were going to be having an event in Florence, Italy, which is my favorite city. And I pictured a scenario in which I might be approached by the education chair for Florence. And he might ask me, if we were to invite you to Florence, what might you do? And I figured he would say something like, better be really special because everybody wants to go to Florence. Well, I'm sure you've had this happen where you picture a scenario and it comes true exactly as you envisioned it, because I finish my talk, gentleman approaches me, I'm the education chair for Florence, what would you do? I looked him right in the eyes and I said, how about How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci? And he said, can you really do that? And I said, sure. So basically I made it up. And then I had 6 months to give the keynote to YPO company presidents, who are a rather demanding audience, but they loved it and it resonated so profoundly. I thought, what better than to turn this into a book? So that's how it all launched.
That is a wonderful story. I love that. You kind of, there's a little bit of juggling in there, because you say, well, maybe this could happen. And if I get asked, and when you get asked, you got to wing it. So I think Leonardo would be proud of you, because he was creative himself.
Well, I'd also say, I'd humbly say that there was a little bit of grace under pressure.
Well, I'll take that all day. So there's some, if memory serves, there are 7 lessons in that book. Do you want to share a couple with us?
Sure. Well, the first one, the first principle for thinking like Da Vinci is curiosità. Curiosità. Curiosity in English. It's our birthright. Every child is born with unlimited curiosity, amazing energy, and phenomenal imagination. But then we send them to school. Answers are more important than questions. And as the years go by, the energy gets less, the imagination gets gets less. So when you have a personal renaissance of your original, your birthright of creativity, which comes through your natural curiosity, reawakens the imagination, raises your energy level, and sets the stage for applying the next 6 principles. So that's why it's the first principle.
Great. I love your idea of focusing on curiosity, because I think that gets overlooked in the leadership realm. So, Michael, I'm sure you've been asked that question, maybe by YPO members. I understand it theoretically, but how do I keep myself curiosity? Do I become a child again? What's your answer to that, Michael?
Well, the answer to that is yes, which is why I teach them how to juggle, and I teach them mind mapping and drawing and doodling, and we do all sorts of movement. We drink wine. I do a wine team building exercise with my corporate clients to get them out of their box and their habits. We get them to write poetry. I bring in my wife and she sings for them. So we give them this experience of art, of play, but then we link it to, okay, how do we apply this freer, more playful mode of thinking to running your company, to writing your strategic plan, to executing your strategic plan? And this is where, in very practical terms, we help CEOs learn, for example, instead of coming into a meeting and telling everybody what they think first, we have them come in and ask questions about what everybody else thinks first. And they connect better with all the people. Everybody feels valued. And then the CEO makes a wiser, more informed decision.
Cool. Now, you followed that up with, if I remember when we chatted about Leonardo, that's on the creative side, begins with curiosity. And then you distinctly talked about the applications of it and made it practical. I love the linking to strategic planning, which is all too often thought of as not creative, but that's great. But you took this one step further with your next book about how to innovate like Edison. How did that evolve?
So it was a few years after the Da Vinci book had come out, and I got a phone call, very nice, mellifluous voice on the other side of the phone. The woman said, "Hello, my name is Sarah Miller Caldecott." She said, "I'm Thomas Edison's great-great-great-grandniece." She said, "I have an MBA from Dartmouth, from the Tuck School." She said, "I read your book about Da Vinci. I was tremendously inspired, and I wanted to connect with you." Well, in that nanosecond, a light bulb went off. You can actually, it's a spark of inspiration. It's on my T-shirt. I had the idea, let's do a book together, and together we'll do for Edison what I did for Da Vinci. Now, obviously, I didn't tell her that right away, but we connected, and sure enough, we wound up collaborating on Innovate Like Edison, which I thought would be a perfect complement to How to Think Like Da Vinci, which appeals to a lot of people. Fortunately, it still does. The book came out 25 years ago. It's still going really strong. I get inquiries from all over the world on a regular basis about it. People say, "Can you teach my people how to think like Da Vinci?" Having said that, there's a lot of folks with an engineering background, and Edison is their hero, because they realize also that not only was Edison a brilliant engineer, he not only invented the system to illuminate the entire planet, he not only invented the technology for sound recording and the music industry, and all the technology for the movie. So he illuminated the world, invented the phonograph and modern sound recording, and he invented the movies. But Edison's greatest invention was the systematic approach to a culture of innovation. He's the first person to do that. So everybody talks about Tesla. He was a genius, no question. You never would have heard about Tesla if Edison didn't bring him over to work in the Edison laboratory. So go ahead.
Yeah, I always like to think of innovation as applied creativity, and certainly that's what Edison did. Now, here's a question, and I'm sure you've gotten this, the next question about okay, I need innovation, Michael. I want my team to be innovative, but where do I begin? What can I learn from old Tom? So,
Well, there are 5 competencies for innovating like Edison. And we take people through those 5 competencies, and then we give them specific practical tools to embody them. And then we actually have them apply those competencies in the context of a live seminar to whatever their most important issues are. So, for example, the first competency is what we call a solution-centered mindset. And this was Edison's phenomenal talent for inspiring people. He would always seek a more innovative, better solution. He would grill anybody who came to him and said, is this your absolute best thinking? Is there anything you haven't thought of? Are you going to present this to me? And you know that there's nothing. They'd go back and say, wait, give me another week.
yeah. Yeah.
It's just because he'd always say, there must be a better way, and we're going to find it. So it's this amazing passion to find real solutions instead of getting hung up on, oh my God, we have a problem. He understood the power of attitude, but then he backed it up with technique and expertise. And that's the combination we all need.
And I like that, because a lot of people, I disagree with this, but perceive themselves as not being creative. And so I'm not creative, so how can my team be creative? But what you just said was, and Edison is highly creative, innovative, of course, but he surrounded himself with other creative types and let them provided a system, but let them flourish. Am I correct in that, Michael?
You're correct in that. And you make 2 points there that are very important. One is, first of all, a lot of people do define themselves as not so creative. And that's who most of my clients have been over the last 45 years. They've been a lot of engineers and MBAs and scientists and PhDs, biochemists and so on, who think they're analytical and logical, and they've been trained to think step by step, and their self-image is, I'm not creative. And it takes me about a half a day to utterly transform that permanently in measurable ways that can be life-changing for the people who experience it. However, even if I teach you how to think like Leonardo and innovate like Edison and learn all their ideation and creativity techniques, if you work in a system that stifles creativity, that punishes innovation, it's not going to flourish. So we have to look at the systems level. How do we create organizational structures and organizational culture that allows you, once you've learned how to think creatively yourself, to actually flourish and then connect with others? Because one of the other principles for innovating like Edison is to create a team approach to innovation.
Great. Now, these are 2 creative geniuses that you're portraying. You and your exploration, you've been writing books for decades now, 4 decades, if I can count correctly. You are now exploring physical well-being, and you have a book came out recently, The Healing Organization. What led you in that direction, Michael? So,
well, first, to back up, so that I never made a separation between so-called physical well-being and mental well-being and spiritual well-being and emotional well-being. Right from the beginning, I was looking for a way to, first of all, find that kind of well-being myself and help other people discover it. So I've taken an integrated approach throughout my career. My master's degree is in psychophysical re-education, re-educating the mind and the body.
yeah.
And I've written previous books about, my very first book is called Body Learning. So there's been a through line of how do we find wellness on every level, but the missing link in wellness relates to what we're just talking about, is often the organizational structure. So The Healing Organization is a book about how capitalism can become conscious and how we can align profit with human welfare, as was the original notion of Adam Smith, who 17 years before he wrote The Wealth of Nations, wrote the theory of moral sentiments. People have lost touch with the theory of moral sentiments. So we're trying to bring back an integration with my co-author, Professor Raj Sisodia, who's the co-founder of Conscious Capitalism. We wrote this book where we profile more than 25 different companies who've actually created the kinds of culture where you can thrive as a human being, where you will feel happier and more whole as a result of going to work, that are also, and here's the most important part for skeptical, tough-minded business types, you'll make more money.
What do you know? Well, I'm very intrigued with the idea of the healing organization, because its theme underneath it is a sense of belonging, but a sense of community, and that is essential to the concept of what we're looking for today. And I think that, as you well know, and I think we've discussed, there's an epidemic of loneliness, and so can work be a community? Can we create community at work? Michael. So,
well, that's why I wrote this. The Art of Connection, 7 relationship building skills every leader needs now. Because I saw, after years of teaching creativity and innovation, that when it really happened, it was because leaders were skilled at connecting with and bringing out the best in other people. So I have a passion for helping people develop those skills, because it's probably the greatest correlate for health, longevity, and happiness.
that's good. No, that's one of that connection. I had forgotten that. Shame on me, but but I gave you an opportunity there. So you mentioned your lovely wife, who is an acclaimed opera singer. So what has she taught you about creativity and presence? So,
well, first of all, just her very being is, I'm somebody who gets bored easily. And I knew that if I was going to commit to be with one person, it better be really interesting. And she's the most entertaining person. I mean, I married a world-class professional entertainer, and I've never been bored. I can't wait for her. She's out at the store right now. I can't wait for her to come home. We have dinner together every night. She's my favorite person in the world. She's quirky, funny, entertaining, natural, authentic, and brilliant. And on a professional level, I learned something, or reinforced something that I thought I knew, but I saw her do it in a way that I've never forgotten. So she's starred in opera performances around the world with some of the greatest companies in the world. And could be a diva, except she's always been focused on caring for and bringing out the best in everyone else in the cast. So I noticed that about her right away. And you can see it on stage, because a lot of times she's singing the aria, everything is focused on her. But what I noticed is, when someone else is singing an aria, Deborah will give her full attention and energy to that person, because she understands that it's the ensemble that makes the performance really great. So she's as committed to bring out the best in all the other performers as she is to, rocking the audience when she's singing like you just can't even believe.
What a lovely tribute to her, but also a lesson for us and the idea of collaboration, where we can't always, the spotlight is not always shining on us. And when it is not, we support the person who is under the spotlight. And it's a good lesson, and especially coming from an artistic endeavor. So it's very tangible and for us, and it's a good lesson, stage presence. So you also, because you're a communicator, you're a fabulous speaker, and highly, highly recognized as a world-renowned speaker, you also wrote a book on public speaking. So why did you want to dissect your craft for others to pick apart, Michael?
Well, it's the funny thing is, my first book came out in 1981, and I loved it. I mean, people started inviting me to speak all around the world about what was in the book. And then I was put on retainer by the DuPont company, by their learning resources division. And I was so naive back then, I didn't even know what a retainer was. But it said money every month for doing what I love to do. How cool is that? So after a couple of years, I had taught them everything I knew. And I thought, well, this retainer thing is too sweet. I got to make up some new stuff. I said, I have to write another book. And I thought to myself, what do I know about that I actually am qualified to write a book about? So, oh, well, I've been giving presentations around the world now to, in those days, it was people twice my age who were senior executives. Now they're people half my age. But I said, I know about this, so I could write a book. So in 1988, I published this book called Present Yourself, Captivate Your Audience with Great Presentation Skills. And it stayed in print for 30 years. It went out of print in 2018. Just when I was really thinking, this needs to be updated. I have learned so much over the course of these 30 years. So Mastering the Art of Public Speaking is Present Yourself plus 30 years of experience speaking around the world.
Great. I love how all this stuff's coming together. But the one thing we haven't explored here, and I know the audience wants to hear it, especially Todd and Amy, both fellow members of MG100, are listening breathlessly. Tell us about juggling.
So when I was struggling to figure out what I would do with my life, having graduated in philosophy. When all the
that's practical.
When all the big philosophy companies didn't approach me for a high-paying job, I knew I wanted to do something that would help the world and something where I could learn continuously. I thought of going to medical school, but in those days you had to focus solely on disease. They didn't yet have integrative or functional medicine training. I thought of getting my PhD in psychology, but in those days you had to study psychosis and neurosis. They hadn't invented positive psychology yet. So I went off and I was studying meditation and the spiritual teachings of the world. And I spent a year with a wonderful meditation master, looking at all the world's great spiritual traditions. And I had these great insights, but I thought, well, now what do I do? I have no real practical skill. But I just saw juggling and I just thought, that's the coolest thing. That is so beautiful. And I knew I had tried to play a musical instrument, not that much talent. I had tried singing, I tried drawing, but I discovered I had a talent for juggling. And I decided I would become really good. So I got good enough that I got invited to perform with the Rolling Stones and Bob Dylan. But the best thing that happened was then I figured out, the way I learned how to juggle would transfer as a way to teach groups of people how to work together and meet a challenge. So I created this team building exercise around learning how to juggle. I have juggling balls here from all various corporate clients over the years. I've taught 1,000 IBM engineers how to juggle in a big, huge ballroom. It's where we started. We talked about curiosità and becoming as a child. You give some serious executive a couple of juggling balls, and then you give them the freedom to let the balls drop. And you ask their colleagues to pick the balls up for them so they don't have to worry about making a mistake. And all of a sudden, you get them to focus on the throw and their own poise and their own breathing. And all of a sudden, they're doing something that most of them thought they could never do. And they go, oh, my God, this is so cool. So that's a little bit about the juggling background.
I love that. Well, as a shout out to fellow Amy, who has served, she is been on an opera board in San Francisco. She asked me to ask you, what's your favorite opera and why do you choose that opera? So
my favorite opera is whatever one Deborah is performing in.
Good answer.
But I do love her. She's one of the greatest Carabinos the world has ever seen in The Marriage of Figaro. And that's right up there at the top. But she's also a killer Rosina in The Barber of Seville. So those are some of my favorites. She also starred in Handel's Radamisto at the Santa Fe Opera, where the opera critic of the New York Times, Anthony Tomasini, said, "The beautiful Deborah Demansky sings with luscious tone and lyrical refinement." I'm a big fan of whatever she's doing.
Great. So, Michael, we could be going on for hours here, but we're racing along. And as you know, I ask every guest a story about grace. Do you have one you'd like to share with us?
Yes, I do. So it was 2004. I had been single for 7 years, having gone through a difficult divorce. I'd been out on all kinds of dates and had every kind of possible frustration of things not quite working out. I got in a plane to go out to California to teach on this Alexander Technique seminar where I teach every year. Mm-hmm. And on the way out, I read Brian Weiss's book, Only Love is Real, read it in one sitting on the plane. And then I had one of these moments that you can't fake, a moment of genuine, complete surrender. I said, God, look, I've tried everything to be the right person, to show up, to find the right true love. Nothing's worked. I give up. I put everything in your hands. So I met Deborah the next day because she came on the course because she read my book, The Body Learning, when she was at Juilliard. She was taking Alexander Technique lessons. Her teacher gave her the book. In the book, I recommended this seminar. We met on the seminar. At the end of the week, I said, if you're ever coming to the New York area, let me know. She said, I'm coming next month for my Carnegie Hall debut. I said, let me take you out to celebrate. Well, that was 18 and a half years ago. We've been together ever since. And that is the greatest moment of grace in my life.
What a wonderful story. I love that. It's got everything. It's got romance. It's got possibility. It's got higher power to it. It is, well, I'm sure others have said this, but it's almost operatic.
Exactly. Well, Deborah's my COO. She's my chief opera officer.
That's good. So one final, because we have a minute. And what's a takeaway that folks ask you for? Michael, how can I be more creative or innovative? Or what do you say? What's when you're asked that kind of question, Michael? So,
well, I tend to help people shift their self-definition, because study at Stanford found that if you can get people to simply pretend that they're creative, their scores on creativity tests go up 25%. So the first thing is an attitude adjustment. But then if I could just teach one practical technique to be more creative, it's mind mapping, which is how I've written all my books. And people who are familiar with our friend Todd's brilliant work in visual leadership, what Todd has done is taken the genius of mind mapping and translate that same way of thinking into how you bring out the best in a leader, in a team, in an organization. So I'm delighted to see him doing the next evolution of what I've started to teach almost 45 years ago.
Right. And to give a shout out to Todd, that's Todd Churches and his book, Visual Leadership. Michael, how can people find you?
MichaelGelb.com, Gelb, MichaelGelb.com is the best way.
Great. Well, we will certainly put that in the notes. What a delight to speak to you today. And I love your energy and the creativity that you shape your message, and it gives us inspiration, my friend. So with that, we will log off. So.
Grazie mille.